Henry Provenchia met Lizzie Hutchins in 1890 at a local dance in Somersworth, New Hampshire. At the time, Somersworth was a typical mill town where daily life revolved around textile factories and young people had few opportunities for entertainment. It was there that 19-year-old Henry noticed 15-year-old Lizzie, an energetic girl with a lively spirit. Just 3 weeks later, they were married. He was 19, she was 15. Such a hasty decision may have been driven by intense infatuation, practical considerations, or both. Perhaps family pressure, or the need to combine incomes in order to survive. At first, the marriage appeared to be a successful one. Henry likely worked in a mill or as a tradesman, while Lizzie kept house. Before long, however, the darker side of the young wife's temperament began to surface. This was more than youthful irritability. When Lizzie lost her temper, she turned to violence. In an era when female aggression was considered highly unnatural, her behavior shocked those around her. Henry later recalled that on one occasion, everything went black before his eyes when she struck him on the nose. The fact that a man in the late 19th century openly admitted to being beaten by his wife speaks volumes. The situation at home must have been unbearable and likely known to the neighbors. The birth of their son did not save the marriage. Instead, it deepened its troubles. Lizzie began drinking heavily. This may have been the result of postpartum depression or growing despair over an early marriage and persistent poverty. At the time, female alcoholism was seen as a profound social disgrace, and if Lizzie drank openly, it suggests she no longer cared about public opinion. Alcohol only intensified her aggression. The couple argued constantly, and the child grew up amid shouting matches and drunken scenes. In 1897, after 7 years of misery, they decided to separate. For French-Canadian Catholics, divorce was nearly unthinkable, so they chose to live apart instead. Notably, Henry took their son with him. At a time when courts and society almost always left children with their mothers, Lizzie's reputation as a violent drunkard worked against her. Henry moved to Rochester, about 20 miles from Somersworth, while Lizzie was left alone. In Rochester, Henry tried to start over. He needed help with the household and someone to look after his son, so he hired an 18-year-old housekeeper named Annie Cox. Annie likely came from a poor family. Otherwise, she might not have accepted such work. Living under the same roof quickly drew them closer. For Henry, the calm and gentle Annie was the complete opposite of his former wife. For the young woman, the arrangement offered the prospect of marriage and a home of her own. Before long, their relationship went beyond employment, and they began living openly as a family, without attempting to hide it from their neighbors. Lizzie's mother, Sadie Fuse, also lived in Rochester. She noticed that another woman was living in her son-in-law's house and reported this to her daughter. The news triggered a fit of near-mad jealousy in Lizzie. Even though she herself had destroyed the marriage, the thought of Henry being happy with another woman was unbearable. Alcohol only fueled her rage. Lizzie began traveling to Rochester to spy on the couple. She spent what little money she had on tickets, watched the house for hours, peered through windows, and hid in sheds and outbuildings. Henry and Annie were aware of the surveillance and lived in constant tension, fearing her sudden appearance. Lizzie came to see Henry alone several times, trying to reconcile. According to rumor, despite their separation, they were occasionally intimate, perhaps the result of old habits or Lizzie's ability to manipulate her husband. These encounters gave her false hope that a reunion was still possible. During her final visit, however, everything changed. Lizzie asked Henry to kiss her, and he refused. That small gesture became a point of no return. In response, she snapped bitterly that she would take care of his pleasure herself. The remark sounded like a threat, but Henry, accustomed to her outbursts, did not take it seriously. On January 30th, 1899, Lizzie spent the night drinking in her apartment in Somersworth with Henry's sister, Agnes Provenchia, and a deputy marshal named Packard. The gathering turned into a night of heavy drinking, and the officer stayed over. On the morning of January 31st, while Packard was still asleep, Lizzie took his revolver and his watch. At 11:27 a.m., she and Agnes, both still intoxicated, boarded a train bound for Rochester. Their first stop was the home of Lizzie's mother, Sadie Fuse. Sadie immediately noticed her daughter's condition and reproached her. "Lizzie, you know I do not welcome people who come to my house drunk." Lizzie replied with chilling bluntness, "You might not be so angry if you knew why I'm here. I've come to kill the woman who is living with my husband, and I intend to do it." She added that she had locked the man in his room and taken his weapon. Then, right in front of her mother, Lizzie asked for machine oil and began carefully cleaning and oiling the stolen revolver. The cold-blooded calm with which she prepared the murder weapon is striking. Sadie was likely too frightened or too shocked to intervene. Before leaving, Lizzie and Agnes went down to the cellar to drink more. For courage. Agnes Provenchia's role in the story remains ambiguous. She later claimed, in broken English, that she accompanied Lizzie at gunpoint, that her sister-in-law threatened to kill her if she refused to go to Henry's house. Whether Agnes was truly a hostage or a reluctant accomplice, too frightened to defy a drunken and armed woman, is difficult to determine. What is clear is that they went together. The two women entered Henry's house without knocking. The door was unlocked. Annie Cox greeted them, unaware of the deadly danger she was facing. Lizzie immediately asked whether Annie intended to live with Henry permanently. Realizing the threat, the young woman tried to save herself. She said she was preparing to leave and would do so at once if Lizzie would not harm her. According to another version, Lizzie ordered her to get out, and Annie refused. The exchange was brief. Lizzie pulled a revolver from her stocking. At the sight of the weapon, Agnes panicked and fled the house without attempting to intervene. Lizzie fired. The first bullet struck Annie's arm, which she instinctively raised to shield herself. Lizzie then coldly fired 3 more shots into her body. 18-year-old Annie Cox collapsed and died at the scene. After leaving the scene of the crime, Lizzie encountered an acquaintance on the street, Joseph Hanneman. In an agitated state, she immediately confessed to him, "Do I look like a woman who has killed someone?" Hanneman, confused, answered, "No." "Yes," she went on, "I fired 3 shots into Annie Cox, and I'm going to kill my husband." She said she had been thinking about it for 6 months. Lizzie's logic was simple and horrifying. If Henry could not belong to her, he would belong to no one. She showed Hanneman the revolver and said she had saved 1 bullet for herself in case the police tried to take her alive. Remarkably, Hanneman did not report her to the authorities at once, giving Lizzie time to attempt an escape. Hanneman went to Henry's house to verify Lizzie's words and found Annie's body lying in a pool of blood. Meanwhile, Lizzie and Agnes hurried to the train station but missed the passenger train. Agnes remained in Rochester, where she was soon arrested. Lizzie, however, showed resourcefulness. She climbed into a freight car carrying horses and rode it as far as Dover. From there, she boarded another train bound for Portland, Maine, in an effort to flee. But the telegraph moved faster than the railroads. Police had already circulated descriptions of a dark-haired woman, armed and dangerous. When the train arrived in Portland, officers were waiting on the platform. Lizzie was arrested and returned to Rochester. The mystery of the revolver was soon resolved. Deputy Marshal Packard awoke in a locked apartment to find both his weapon and the women gone. Realizing that his service revolver had become the murder weapon due to his own drunkenness and negligence, he panicked. He fled the city, sending a telegram to his superiors to resign. His career was effectively destroyed. Lizzie was charged with first-degree murder, a crime that carried the possibility of the death penalty. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Her confessions to her mother and to Hanneman, Agnes's testimony, and the murder weapon itself. At first, Lizzie attempted to lie, claiming self-defense, alleging that young Annie had attacked her first. Her attorneys, however, understood that this version would not withstand scrutiny. In September, 8 months after the killing, Lizzie accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. On October 3, 1899, Lizzie Provenchia was taken to prison. A crowd gathered at the Dover train station, eager to catch a glimpse of the murderer. Lizzie turned her departure into a final performance. She wore an elegant black satin dress, a fashionable black feather boa draped around her neck, and a hat with a veil concealing her face. The handcuffs on her wrists were discreetly covered with fabric. She carried herself with chilling composure, shedding not a single tear. Under the gaze of the crowd, she stepped into the rail car that carried her away from her former life forever. History preserves no record of her later years in prison, but the image of the Lady in Black, who murdered her rival out of jealousy, lingered long in the memory of New England.